So, what actually is going on in Gaza? Is Israel perpetrating war crimes, crimes against humanity, or is Israel simply fighting the battle of her life? Is Israel fighting for her survival against bloodthirsty terrorists who will stop at nothing? Nothing at all. No crime is too low. No brutality is unthinkable when it comes to the Hamas intentions about destroying and eliminating the Jewish people. Listen to this incredible and moving interview between Jake Tepper from CNN and Israel's ambassador, Yecheil Leiter, as he says the most incredible perspective on Israel's extreme caution and sensitivity. Wait, it comes up in just a few moments at the very end of this interview. Watch it for yourself. It's really moving.
Joining us now, the Israeli ambassador to the United States, Yecheil Leiter. Ambassador Leiter, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. So we see a lot of Israelis clearly frustrated. We're told, and you correct me if I'm wrong with any of these assertions I'm about to make, that Hamas signed on to this ceasefire and hostage deal more than a week ago, put forward by the Qataris and the Egyptians. And we're told that it's largely in line with what Israel previously had agreed to. So what is the holdup? And can you guarantee that the remaining 20 hostages who are still alive will come back to Israel soon?
Well, we can't guarantee that the 23 hostages will come back soon. They're being held by Hamas. We can guarantee that we're going to do everything in our power to get them out. We started this. There were 255 hostages being held by Hamas. Under Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership, 205 have been released through negotiation and through military pressure. We've never achieved any release of hostages without military pressure alongside with negotiations. So this is under discussion. We're looking at what the possibilities are for a ceasefire, a temporary deal. But at the same time, it has to be very clear. This war ends when Hamas ends. We need to see this war end where Hamas is disarmed, where Gaza is demilitarized, and all of our hostages are out. None of this, as the president has said repeatedly, none of this drip-drab kind of thing, a few hostages now, a few hostages later. If we are not careful, what's going to happen is we're going to get a few hostages out now, and we're never going to see the rest of the hostages again.
So the Arab League several weeks ago called for Hamas to surrender and to no longer be in charge of Gaza, right? Whatever happened to that? Has there been sufficient pressure on Hamas from the Arab League to achieve that, to end this war?
Well, that was a great declaration by the Arab League, and I think that is a very positive development overall for the Middle East, which probably is a result of our taming and degrading Iran and the extremists in the Middle East. But no, they haven't applied the necessary pressure, if they could. The interesting thing is that we've seen this before. We're both old enough to remember when we defeated the Palestine Liberation Organization in Lebanon in 1982-83, and Hamas's predecessor, Yasser Arafat, left. He laid down his arms and left by boat. Mm-hmm. This is the same thing that can happen today. Hamas has to leave. We're not going to go back to a situation like on October 6th when the country was being held hostage. We cannot have a situation where the country is being held hostage by jihadis living at our border.
But what is the holdup? Like, why? I mean, if this agreement, as we're told, basically is 98% of what Israel agreed to a month ago, and Hamas has agreed to it, why isn't this been agreed to so there can be a ceasefire?
Well, isn't this interesting? I mean, the answer is in your question itself.
The 2%.
If Israel agreed to it 2 months ago, what happened? Where was Hamas? Obviously, something's changed in the ingredients. And Hamas is moving in such a way so that they remain standing. Okay, they've reconstituted themselves through the lull in the fighting. They've reconstituted themselves. Yeah. They've moved up to 25, 30,000 fighters. They are now regrouped in an area of 25% of Gaza. And that's where the hostages are. And that remaining 25% has to be completely disarmed. We want to see Hamas out. Because otherwise, the country is going to go back in a situation where we're going to be held hostage again. We can't do that.
So Netanyahu, the prime minister...
excuse me one second, Jay.
Yeah.
Under a situation when we were held hostage on October 6th, 1,200 of our people were slaughtered. We can't go back into that scenario.
I understand. Let me ask you about the horrific events from yesterday. Prime Minister Netanyahu called the Gaza strike that killed 5 journalists. He called it a tragic mishap. You posted on Twitter or X, quote, Dwight Eisenhower once said, war is a grim, cruel business, a business justified only as a means of sustaining the forces of good against those of evil. War is especially grim when fighting a death cult like Hamas. But I do wonder, at this point, 18 months into it, with so much of Hamas degraded, so much of Gaza destroyed, so many unnecessary or so many tragic innocent people killed, the killing of journalists, the killing of aid workers, children starving to death. This is not what you are trying to achieve, you argue, but it is happening anyway. Is it worth it at this point? Are you not afraid of what Israel is doing, and also the status of Israel? Many supporters of Israel are worried that it's becoming a pariah.
Many supporters of Israel don't have to face what we face in the Middle East. Look, you got to ask yourself a question. A country that's capable of taking out the control of all of Iranian airspace in 72 hours, allowing for the B-2s of the United States to come in and obliterate the nuclear weapons operations in Iran, is not capable of ending this war sooner? Of course we are. But it's because we're taking precautions that no other country has ever taken. No other country has had to face a situation of 450 miles of terror tunnels under an area that's 24 miles long. We're dealing with a ghoulish, fiendish organization that's not only hiding behind civilians, but is using civilians as cannon fodder. They enjoy this. This is a death cult. They say this. You have to read their stuff. Mm-hmm. They're a death cult that appreciates the fact that people die. So they put them out in front. They want to see as many people die. And by the way, the numbers that you're quoting are Hamas Ministry of Health numbers. I mean, that's like saying that MS-13 officials are issuing statements.
The only number I quoted was the 5 journalists.
Well, we're talking about, you said, the many non-combatants, the many civilians.
If you wouldn't dispute that in 18 months, Israel has killed thousands of innocent people. I'm not saying you're trying to, but you have.
We're actually doing everything we can to avoid it, like no one else in the past has. And some experts actually say we have the lowest non-combatant ratio to combatants that have ever existed in modern warfare.
My only point is that it's too many.
It's too many. We want to end this war. Let's get this war over with. Put the pressure on Mr. Qatari, Mr. Egyptian. Come down and say to the Hamas, this is enough. Okay, get out of there. You're not going to get any more support. You have to understand that, Hamas leadership is sitting in Istanbul. Where the hell is Mr. Erdogan? Why are Hamas leadership sitting in Qatar right now? Why is the international community not saying the leadership of Hamas is being closed down, period? So they're there. They're leading this campaign of delegitimization of Israel. It's very PC now. Israel's responsible for genocide. Israel's responsible for apartheid. Israel kills children. Everybody kind of jumps on the bandwagon. We don't. We do everything we possibly can. My own son was killed because we do not kill innocent civilians. He went in on foot into Gaza and led the troops at the beginning of the war, was killed when he went into a Hamas booby trap. If we were doing what we're being accused of doing, okay, maybe he'd be alive today. And so many of our soldiers that have died are being alive today. And the demonstrations you showed are only half of the demonstrations. The other half of the demonstrations are families of soldiers who are saying to the prime minister, you have to end this war with a defeat of Hamas because otherwise we're going back to October 6th.
Before you go, Mr. Ambassador, the name of your fallen son?
Moshe.
Moshe. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you for being here.
I appreciate that, Jake. Thank you so much.
And I hope that the war ends soon.
I do too. Thank you.
Ambassador Leiter, thank you so much.
How touching that the Israeli ambassador to the United States, his own son, was killed in action as he entered into the booby traps of Gaza on foot. If Israel was trying to commit genocide, they would have done so in one day. They would have dropped an atomic bomb on Gaza and would have wiped them all out without even a single soldier falling. Yet here, Israel's ambassador to the United States, his own son was killed in action because they were trying to separate the baby from the bathwater. They were trying to separate the Hamas militants, the terrorists, from the civilians amongst whom they deliberately embed themselves. Just today, the news is breaking that because of Israel's offensive to take over all of Gaza in Operation Gideon's Chariots Phase 2, because they're taking all over Gaza and they're leaving nothing on the table, no more hostage negotiations in parts, no more dribs and drabs, it's all or nothing. Just this morning, Israel has rescued the remains of 2 hostages. One was 55-year-old Ilan Weiss from Kibbutz Be'eri, who was murdered on October 7th. His wife and daughter were rescued from Gaza early on in the war, but his remains have now been returned back to his family, and a second hostage is still being investigated under forensic investigations to determine his identity. And they did this not through negotiations, they did this through military force, because when someone breaks into your house, when someone's trying to destroy you and murder your family and rape your family and burn down everything that you own, this is not a time for negotiations. This is a time to fight for your life, and you got to do what you've got to do. In fact, it's in this week's Torah portion where the Torah tells us a message for today. The Torah is to live with the times. The Torah is God's wisdom, God's message. And the Torah portion of the week is the answers to the dilemmas, has the answers to any questions and dilemmas that we might be struggling with on a personal or on a global level. The Torah tells us this week an amazing, amazing directive as to how to fight a war, and more importantly, how to win a war. The Torah says in Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 19 and 20, very important. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 19 and 20. It says like this: if you besiege a city for many days in order to wage war against it, to capture it, you should not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. You may eat from them, but you may not cut them down. The tree is the tree of the field is a man that is not necessary to be included in the siege. Man is compared to the tree of the field. However, and this is the kicker. However, if you know which type of tree it is, that it's not a fruit tree, you may destroy it by cutting it down to build a barricade against the city that is waging war against you until it is conquered. And these are the key words: until it is conquered. You have to fight a war until you finish the war, until full conquest, full submission. You don't start a war that you're not willing to end. This is a terrible, terrible mistake that happened in World War I that ended not in victory, but in a truce. And because World War I ended in a truce, therefore, it led to World War II, which in World War II, the Allies were wiser and they understood that at this point they couldn't come to any agreement, to any armistice agreement, to any truce. Here they needed to have unconditional surrender, which is what Harry Truman insisted from the Japanese and also from the Germans, that they would march the armies of the Allies through the capitals of Germany. And that is the only way to fight a war. You can't do a surgery in order to say halfway through the surgery, oh, there's too much blood and therefore we've got to stop. No, you do a surgery, you finish the surgery, and that way everybody benefits. That way everybody wins. It's a directive from our Torah portion this week that if you're going to fight a battle, you go all the way to the very end. Because to say that we've killed enough people, as Jake Tepper might have said here, it's not the approach. That's not the way to go, Jake. The way you do it is that you uproot the evil. Like when you take out a root canal, you don't do half a root canal and say, there's been enough blood, there's been enough pain, enough tooth has been removed. You don't say that. You remove the entire tooth in the root canal, and then you know that the patient is going to be able to live without pain, to live a normal life. If you really want to see what's actually going on in Gaza, the actual brutalities, which the media refuses to show us, the silence is deafening, then watch this very brief testimony from an actual Gaza hostage, a Jewish hostage, who was detained, imprisoned, abused, raped in Gaza. Listen to her words as she spoke about her traumatic experience inside of Gaza. Listen to this.
Not to be raped. I'm telling them I was on my period. They grabbed me by my hair, hit me on the stomach, causing me lose my breath. They put me guns at me, tried to fill me with my phone. The only thing I could think was why my family have to see me end my life like this. On the way to Gaza, when they start to touch me and sexual abuse me, I passed out physically and mentally. I couldn't handle it anymore. I wake up in a submarine house, lying half naked on rocks, surrounded by Hamas terrorists. When it was time to eat, they took a lot of food to their room that they have meat, rice, and vegetables. At the same time, they left us with our meal, which contained sometimes as little as 10 chickpeas or a piece of dry flat bread, which wasn't always well cooked. Women were raped abuse, and humiliate. And the world choose silence. Why is our pain treated as less? Why our histories questioned, denied, erased? ¿Por qué las víctimas judías somos cuestionadas y se duda de nuestro testimonio cuando el resto se le cree inmediatamente? Este doble estándar no es hipocresía, es traición.
What a dramatic contrast. A Jewish victim in captivity, a hostage in Gaza, raped, abused, starved, tortured, humiliated. But when it comes to the Jewish soldiers invading Gaza to bring back our hostages, you have the ambassador, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations. Israel's ambassador to the United States. His own son is killed because the Jewish soldiers, the Jewish army, the Jewish state is so incredibly sensitized, so careful to mitigate the death of innocent civilians, whereas Hamas terrorists are trying to maximize abuse, torture, trauma, and humiliation. The Jewish soldiers and the Jewish people are trying to minimize abuse and pain and hurt to others. It seems like the world has lost its mind. The media's silence about the plight of the hostages is deafening. But it's you and me, individuals, ordinary people, that can lead a revolution. When we speak up, when we make sure that those voices of the hostages are not silenced. We have the power of social media. We have the power of our communications to drown out the media, to be the voice of sanity in a world that's lost its mind, to be the light amidst the darkness. We can make a difference. It starts right here. It starts right now.